Hi, I'm Mick Connolly and this is my wife Lynn. We've been married for 48 years and I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Lots of things happening in lives, but we want to talk essentially about something that happened to us in 2002.
Just started off as a normal day, and I was looking after my little granddaughter who was 6 at the time. Her sister had been hit by a swing in a park, and so she was in an all-day hospital overnight in Liverpool. And as I was looking after her, we just went shopping. It was a sunny day, just like any other day. And as I came home, I realised I didn't have my door key. And so I went round the back of the house and was really hoping that the back door would be open. And it was. As I came round, I went into the room and Mick was there. And I thought that was strange because he would have been at work. But as I walked in with my granddaughter, these 2 people, strangers in our city, and I wondered who they were, and they took my granddaughter off me and went into the kitchen with her. And I really wondered what was happening, and I remember just thinking, why is Mick here, and who are these people? And as Mick stood up and turned round, I could see that he was really upset, and I began to panic then, and I just said to him, Mick, just tell me what's happened. And he told me that our son Paul had been killed in a knife attack in Liverpool. And, what do you think? What do you say when something like that happens? And I just remember sitting down saying, I can't take in what you're saying. And I think probably because I didn't really want to take in the words that I was hearing. It's just the worst thing a parent can ever hear. And we were absolutely devastated by the news. And of course, the first thing you want to think is, how do I live my life now? And so, things began to go at 100 miles an hour. And we didn't really know what to do. We were just led by the police. Of course, I found out that the 2 strangers in our house were the police. One of them was leading the investigation, and the other one, Andrew, was our liaison officer, who we didn't even know what that meant, but he was there to look after us and to see that we were okay. And so we had the dreadful task of telling people. We had to tell our daughter. Her only brother had been killed, and it was bringing Joanne back from the hospital looking after her daughter to tell her that news that was so awful. And then we had to go and identify Paul. Everything was happening just so fast. And when we went to identify Paul, we just followed. We decided not to travel with the police in the car, but we just wanted to be in our car behind them. And even on the journey there, we didn't really know what to say to each other or how we were supposed to think or feel or act. We were just really numb with the loss and the pain and the shock of it all, because Paul had only gone out to work as usual, and he just never came back.
I think probably the next thing we had to do was go down to identify our son Paul, which was traumatic in itself. And I think from the very beginning, we lost all sense of reality. Nothing seemed real, and yet we were in the midst of something that was very real. We went down and identified Paul. Unfortunately, at the time, we weren't able to kiss Paul or to handle him because of the evidence that would be on the body. Again, something that you never think would happen, and we wouldn't wish it to happen to anybody else, really. It's surreal, and yet inside you know that you've been hit by such a shock. Shock waves really just go throughout your body, and yet in some ways you feel everything, and another way you don't feel anything. All your senses seem to be dulled. I think then after that, our next biggest challenge was to go and ask for witnesses, if there were any witnesses to the crime. And I think this was a day which really changed our lives in the whole situation.
Yeah, we were asked to really just for information, for people to come forward with information to help in the investigation. And so the police asked us would we go the next day to do a press conference that would be shown on a local programme on the TV called Granada Reports. And so we turned up at police headquarters in the centre of Liverpool, and the police were amazing. You know, they just told us at every step what we had to do. And as we stood at the doorway to go in, a cameraman appeared and just took our photograph and disappeared as quick as he came. And then we were shown into a room where the press were going to come in and they would ask us questions. And so we went to the room and they showed us where we would sit, and they told us everything that would happen. And then we went for a cup of tea, and then we came back again, and the media were there. And as they came in, they were very quiet and very respectful. And they asked us lots of questions, but one question in particular really touched us. And they said, you know, how do you feel about the people who've killed your son? And for Mick and I, we hadn't even thought about who'd done it or why or anything like that. We were just so taken up with the loss and with the grief. And we both looked at each other and we said, we forgive them. And that was the furthest thing at that moment, probably from our minds. It was almost a natural reaction that we said we forgive them. And that's because we were Christians, and I gave my life to the Lord. I became a Christian when I was just 14 and still at school. And at this time, I'd been a Christian for, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, when he asked the question, you know, it was one of those things that we hadn't thought of, but we were put on the spot, really, and we had to answer the question. And so that was what came out of our mouths. And it was a decision that, you know, was quickly made, that seemed very random at the time. And we just said, we forgive. And it was very quiet in the room. And obviously the press weren't expecting that response. And they asked us, you know, well, don't you feel any anger? Don't you feel any bitterness, you know? And we just said, no, you know, we wanted to forgive. And forgiveness is a massive thing, and we didn't realise how important it would be. Years later, you know, that affected our lives from then on, and it's still affecting our lives now. It wasn't just that one-off, you know, we've had to forgive over and over, really, when things have come up over the years, and we've, you know, had to forgive time and time again, just so that we can keep in that frame of mind. And, you know, forgiveness has been so important. For me, it was like letting go of the pain. That's what forgiveness is. It means that I don't have to think about that anymore, that side of things. At first, I used to think that forgiveness was all about the other person that you forgave. It was like letting them off the hook, or it was as if things were okay and it didn't matter so much. But for us, you know, I didn't see any conflict between forgiveness and wanting justice as well. Both of those things are right. But the forgiveness for us at the time was something that I was glad that God intervened in our situation, and just allowed that man to ask that question, because it helped us then to make that decision right at that moment. And I would say that was the moment that we actually did forgive. When I look back, that was that moment that was so important. And, you know, I realised that forgiveness wasn't just for the people we forgave, but it's actually good for me. And we all need forgiveness, whether we're a Christian or whether we have another faith, whether we have no faith. Forgiveness is something that will bring healing, it will bring help and wholeness into our lives. and it will actually help us to move on with our lives. And that was a very important aspect for us, because at the time we didn't feel as if life would ever be the same again. And in some respects it isn't, we still don't have our son. But it really began that healing process to moving on with our lives. And that's one of the things that was important. And we decided, that our story was going to be important maybe for lots of people who have got things happening in their lives. Maybe you have things happening in your life that you've never really got over. Things that you've been living with for years and years and years sometimes. We've heard lots of stories since of people who just haven't been able to let go of the hurt that they've endured. And forgiveness isn't saying that it's okay what people have done to us, because obviously it isn't. Pain is real and hurt is real. But the fact that we forgive means that we let go of bitterness and hatred and all of the things that are really 100% destructive and are not helpful. We decided that, our story over the years, it's been 16 years now since Paul died, and it's only just now that we felt able to write a book, and we called it Son of a Preacher Man, because, there's a story about that in the book. But Paul was dancing to that Dusty Springfield song, Son of a Preacher Man, and as he was dancing and singing, he was pointing to himself, because he was the son of Mick, who was a pastor of a church, and so he made it relevant to himself. So really the book couldn't have been called anything else, but that's just a picture of Paul, and it really shows in the book. We hope it's going to be helpful to you. It talks about forgiveness and about the power of forgiveness, which is just amazing. The power not just to forgive the people who've hurt us, but there were times when I felt guilty that Paul had died, as if as a parent I should have protected him in some way. We all feel like that when we're parents. We feel as if we should always be there for our children. But the fact was that Paul was 28, he wasn't a child. And I couldn't have done anything to save him in any way. It was just one of those things. But, forgiveness has just helped so much. And that's one of the things that we've written about in this book.
I think whatever pain you're in, it's so real to you. And other people might say you need to get over things, you need to move on. But I think when you're in pain, it's such a difficult thing. And I think that the book is a good help. And some of the secrets that we found through a lot of pain, I think it would be useful for you. And we can recommend the book. I know we've written it, but nevertheless, we wrote it not as a commercial venture, but literally to help people.
We also talk a lot about comfort as well. It's so important to get the right comfort. And I think along with forgiveness, the comfort is a massive issue as well. And it's getting the right comfort. And other people who've read the book up to now have said, in completely different situations to ours, but they said they found it a comfort and a hope for the future. And that's really the aim of the book. It's to encourage people that, God can bring so much out of tragedy. For us, we always say he's brought triumph out of tragedy. And that's been very important for us to move on. So we hope that the book will be a great help to you.